Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I hope you all are doing absolutely well. Guys, in this video we will be seeing a small exercise of React which is going to improve your knowledge on data fetching. Basically we are going to perform an exercise on how to fetch data and display user data on screen. Okay, when we do that you will learn some basic concepts like how data fetching works in React.js, what are different ways for data fetching, and how loading state works. Okay, like when the data is getting fetched, to improve the user experience we display loading or some text on the screen, how that part works. Okay, so you can see on your screen we will achieve something like this. Basically the user profile data we will be showing, like for example the image of a user, then their name, email, basic data related to them, but this data is not hard coded anywhere. We are fetching this data from an API. Okay, so we will be learning all these things. Before we start the video, if you are new to my channel, make sure to subscribe to the channel as I regularly upload these kind of helpful content for all of you on daily basis. So without wasting any time, let's understand the problem statement. First of all, what we are going to do and what we need to do today. See, we need to build React component, okay, that fetches user data from an API and displays it on the screen. Pretty basic requirement, okay, but it is a very important requirement because doesn't matter how many time you have practiced, whenever you need to fetch data you have some doubts, okay, like where what mistake you are doing, some endpoints that you have to take care, okay, edge cases, like you don't have to do those mistakes, otherwise your DOM will give an error, okay, or there might be issues. We will see all those things. Okay, what are the requirements? Let's see that first. First of all, we need to fetch user data from a API endpoint that we have. Okay, this is the API. From this we have to fetch our user data. Once the user data is fetched, we have to display the user name, email, location and profile picture. Basically all this data is present in this API. We have to show that. Now we also have to show a loading message when the data is getting fetched. Okay, and then we have to ensure the API call runs only once when the component mounts. So all of these things we are going to see. Okay, let's now move on to our code to see how it works. So I have the code on my screen. Okay, you will basically get the code link in the description, don't worry about that. Okay, so see, first of all what we are doing is we are going to use useEffect in this case. Okay, why? Because for data fetching we want that the data should be fetched only once when the component mounts. Okay, for that we are going to use useEffect, and then we are also going to use useState because we want to store data when after it's fetched somewhere. Okay, so for that storing we are going to use useState. See, initially what I have done, I have created two states. Okay, basically first state is user state. User state will have all the values after the data is fetched. Okay, these user state is nothing but the basic details of the data, basic details of the user which we have fetched from the API. Okay, then we have created one more state which is loading state. Basically loading state is the loading loading keyword or the loader that we shows when the data is getting fetched. Okay, so this is that part. We will see what is that also in a minute. Now before we move forward, what we are doing, let's understand that this is the basic structure or DOM structure that we are doing. We will understand this later. First we will understand how data fetching is working. Okay, basically whenever our data is getting fetched, after that we will see how we can display it. See, so useEffect. Okay, what we are doing is here I am having a useEffect. Okay, so initial useEffect I am calling a function fetch data, and this fetch data function I'll write my basic condition or basic code for fetching the data. Now I am going to use like async and await for fetching my data, but there are different ways of fetching data, like fetch dot then, and then we can use XCOs. There are different methods basically, but personally I feel async and await much easier, so I'm using that. So see, we have this function fetch data. What I'm doing is I have created this fetch data as a async function. Okay, then what I'm doing, I'm taking the like constant response, and in constant response I'm using await fetch, and this is my fetch API. Okay, and const JSON await response dot JSON. Basically whatever the response that we have got, we are converting it to a JSON format, and then we are setting the user JSON dot result of 0. Basically in order to understand this, what we are doing here, you need to understand what our API data is. Okay, so if you see our API data looks something like this. Okay, which has a lot of details. So basically from this details we are showing like in our basically all these details like stores in our result. Okay, in result, and then zeroth array or zeroth index. So using that we are just directly storing all the user data into our user state. Once that is done, we are setting the loading state to false. Why? So initially loading state we have set it as true, which means until and unless our data is getting fetched, keep it as true and show loading keyword on the screen, and until and as soon as our loading value becomes false, when it will become false, as soon as our data is fetched. Okay, so once the data is fetched, mark the loading value as false, and once it is made false, then don't show that loading value, instead we will show the user data on that. Okay, and now how am I showing this API data in the console is using this use effect. It is pretty basic. I'm just doing one thing, that in the conditional array I have just written user. Basically whenever my user state changes, then only run this use effect. Okay, and I'm just checking if my user state has any data in it, then show that user. Okay, because we don't want that it should show an empty or undefined value. That is why I'm doing this if condition. Okay, so basic stuff we have already seen, the data that we have got. Now based on the data that we have got, so once this fetch data function will run, okay, once the component mounts, then we will have all the data stored in our user state. Okay, now what we will do, we will display our data on the screen. So first of all, this is just basic heading that I am showing user profile, and then initially I am checking if my loading value is true. Loading value will be true when? Initially, right? Whenever data fetching has not happened. So if the loading value is true, then on the screen show this loading text. Okay, if it becomes false, then show the user data. Pretty basic, which I have already told you. Now let's see, when the loading value becomes false, what we will show. Loading value will become false whenever our data is fetched and stored in user, right? So loading value has become false. We are coming to this condition, and we are now checking if the user has proper data in it. Okay, because we don't want to take any chance that user does not have any data and we are trying to show something, then it will also give an error. So we are just showing checking once that if the user has any data in it. If it is having any data, then only show our basic structure code. So what we have to show, first we have to show the image. Okay, so in image what we are taking source, again we are getting the image source from the data only. So user.picture.large, and alternative text we are giving, okay, like user avatar or anything. Then we are showing the name of the user. So how we are showing the name of the user, user.name.first and user.name.last. Basically I will show you how the data is there in the API, so that you will understand better. So see here we have name, right? So user.data.name.first. okay, so user.name.first. so user.name.first will have the first name of the user, and user.name.last will have the last name of the user. So in this way we will show first name and last name, and then we will have to show email. So email, and then email ID also we will get from the user data only. Basically the data that we have fetched, and location also we will get. Location we are showing two things, one is the city and then other is the country. So basically in this way we are showing the complete user data. Okay, so I hope you have understood the implementation. You will get the code in the description box, and I will also show you when that loading part works. So when I will refresh, again the data fetching will happen, and when the data fetching will happen, you can see we were getting loading text on the screen for few minutes, right? Not few minutes but few seconds. So that part is only when the data is fetching, so we have to show something on the screen, so to have a better user experience to the user. Okay, so I think we have covered everything when it comes to this requirement. And now before we end this video, I have one basic DIY question for all of you. DIY as in do it yourself. This is a easy or simple MCQ that you want to answer, that you have to answer in the comment box. Let's see what is that. The question is, what happens if we forget to add the dependency array in the use effect? Okay, so we were using use effect right here in our code. So if we forget to add this kind of optional, like in that we have an optional array. So in our case we were using the empty optional array. So what if we forget to add that? What will happen in that case? The options are, the API returns, the API request runs only once. Option B is API request never runs. Option C is API request runs on every render causing infinite request, and option D is React throws an error. So you have to drop the answer in the comment box. Basically this is one of the important interview questions that you get based on your use effect hook. So definitely attempt this question and write down the answer in the comment box. So I think that's all for today. If you found the video helpful, please give it a like, and to see more such videos you can subscribe to the channel.